Now, Scott Ross, Executive Director of One Wisconsin Now, former Breitbart media consultant Kurt Bardella, E.J. Dionne, MSNBC contributor and author with Joy Reid of We Are the Change We Seek, the speeches of Barack Obama, and radio talk show host Charlie Sykes. Gentlemen, all, thank you very much for being here. Kurt, I've got to start with you. You used to work at Breitbart. You know Steve Bannon. I want to throw up this Steve Bannon quote. It's element 1, and then we'll go to element 2. Steve Bannon, this is a quote from the Axios report about the healthcare fallout. The Hill article was reporting on the Axios report. Bannon apparently had a conversation with the Freedom Caucus in the Eisenhower Executive Office building when some members visited the White House, and he said, guys, look, this is not a discussion, this is not a debate, you have no choice but to vote for this bill. And then here's the response quote, which I love. Again, from the Hill article, according to the report, one of the Freedom Caucus members said about what Bannon said, one of the members replied, you know, the last time someone ordered me to do something, I was 18 years old, and it was my daddy, and I didn't listen to him either. So is this the Steve Bannon you know, the person who walks in and just says, you will do this or else?
Yeah, I mean, I've said before, Steve ran Breitbart very much like a dictatorship, and it was his way or the highway, and he had no appetite for dissension, no appetite for pushback, no appetite for dissenting opinions. He had no desire to listen to anybody, question on any level his approach or strategy or worldview. And in this case, members of Congress found out what I've known for a very long time, and anyone who's worked at Breitbart has known for a long time, that when Steve Bannon walks into a room, he expects everyone to fall in line, and if not, he'll tell his boss to go create an enemies list.
And so then how does, okay, so if not, create an enemies list, but personality-wise, how does Steve Bannon react to humiliating defeat?
Well, I would say that he's probably never experienced anything quite like this, nor has any president experienced anything quite like this before. But Steve will ultimately work on retribution. I mean, that's the next step. He is, I guarantee you right now, actively plotting to try to take down anyone who's been an obstacle to him.
I have a question for Kurt, but I have to share this graphic that Chuck just used on Meet the Press that talked about the amount of time spent working on trying to get these things done. Obamacare, 187 legislative days, Medicare Part D, 166, welfare reform, 56, tax reform in 86, 323. They spent 17 days on this TrumpCare bill. 17 days. But I am curious to ask Kurt, because this civil war we've known has been going on below the surface between the Bannon faction, the Breitbart faction essentially, and the Priebus faction, Reince Priebus, the vice president, and Paul Ryan. Is this now going to be open warfare? Because it does seem that that Trump has decided to make war on the Freedom Caucus, but the Freedom Caucus is making war on Ryan. It kind of helps him, right? Because the Freedom Caucus is already half destroyed Paul Ryan. Are we really seeing the Breitbartians try to take Ryan down completely?
And I think you saw in the immediate aftermath of healthcare being pulled, the front page of Breitbart had a story about how there's a potential coup against Speaker Ryan. And where do you think all those White House sources came from in that story? They came from the Bannon wing of things. And so, I mean, I think there's no question we have open warfare. It was actually laughable when you've seen the pivot in just 2 days now. It went from, this is the Democrats' fault, and of course I forgot all the meetings that the Democrats were invited to the White House to vote. Yeah, what happened to those? It went from that to, okay, now it's Paul Ryan's fault, now it's the Freedom Caucus, now it's Freedom Partners and Heritage. They have moved so quickly away from the blaming the Democrat strategy because it was laughable and not believable that now they have no choice but to do open warfare. And it's really, like you said, it's Game of Thrones. They're trying to all survive. All these competing factions. Trump is known for jumping around, listen to one person here, one person there. Whatever sticks that moment, that's where he goes with. And nobody wants to lose their seat next to the president. It's not an accident, and it's been observed that Steve Bannon goes everywhere with Trump. He has taken a job, not as chief of staff. He didn't want that job. He didn't want to be in charge of the minutia of the day-to-day that takes you out of the room and not being able to sit next to the president all day.
Big advantage that Ryan has. Nobody in his or her right mind wants his job right now. And that's why he might be able to keep
That's exactly it. I want to thank you to Kurt Bardella, Scott Ross, E.J. Dionne, Charlie Sykes will all be back later on in the show.